Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier in the program tonight, new research has found that Alzheimer's may kill as many people as heart disease or cancer. And joining us now to discuss that new study and what its implications are from the National Alzheimer's Association in Chicago, Dr. Keith Fargo, the Director of Scientific Programs and Outreach. He joins us now by phone from the Chicago area. Dr. Fargo, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the parameters of this study. This is one study, but it is profoundly indicative of this entire dementia landscape. Is that right?
That's correct. It is one study, but it is based on two large cohorts of individuals called the Rush Memory and Aging Project from Rush University in Chicago, as well as the Religious Orders Study. So even though it is one paper, it is based actually on two large groups of people.
And so the results were basically, at least they indicate that the deaths caused by Alzheimer's in this country alone have been grossly underestimated for years now.
That's correct, exactly. So people have been looking at only death certificates to estimate the number of people who die from Alzheimer's disease every year. And we at the Alzheimer's Association have been saying that that's really an undercount, as you mentioned. And this new study actually points that out, where when they look at the underlying cause of death in the population, they see that Alzheimer's disease actually accounts for 500,000 deaths a year in the United States.
So, Dr. Fargo, let me stop you right there, because we were discussing this new study earlier in the show, and the question came up about physiologically, how can you say that Alzheimer was the primary cause of death? Or is that even an accurate phrase? Is it a collateral? Is it a related cause? Or can you say that someone actually died as a direct result of Alzheimer's?
Well, usually what ends up on the death certificate is not Alzheimer's disease. Sometimes it is, as you can see from the 83,000 number, but many times it's not. So many times what ends up on the death certificate is something like pneumonia or exposure. But then when you take a close look at groups of people who have Alzheimer's disease and groups of people who don't have Alzheimer's disease, it turns out that many, many more people with Alzheimer's disease die every year from these causes that are actually related to the brain degeneration that they're experiencing from Alzheimer's disease. So, for example, with pneumonia, what happens is the brain centers that control your swallowing deteriorate to the point that you can no longer swallow your food correctly. Some of it ends up in your lungs. You develop pneumonia, and you pass away from the pneumonia. But the fact is, you would not have had pneumonia in the first place if it weren't for the fact that you had this fatal brain disease.
So we know that there are studies being conducted all the time on a long list of topics and illnesses. Do you think that this one study will lead to many more? Is it indicative of a larger group of studies that will be coming to the public, coming to light soon? Or is this kind of an isolated group of statistics?
There are actually many people trying to tackle problems of epidemiology around Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and so I would expect actually that we will see further studies in the future. And we at the Alzheimer's Association welcome that. We know that Alzheimer's disease affects more than 5 million Americans. It's a huge problem, and this kind of study really should serve as a wake-up call and an eye-opener for folks to understand the size of this problem. That it's not just amnesia, it's a universally fatal brain disease that's killing 500,000 Americans a year, and we need to have a national response to that that is in sync with the true size of the problem.
And last question, Dr. Fargo, I wanted to ask you, how hopeful are you that this kind of study, or maybe this one in particular, will lead to greater funding and awareness so that perhaps Alzheimer's takes on the weight and the awareness, say, of breast cancer or heart disease?
We're very hopeful. We've made great strides in this country with reducing death rates from cancer and heart disease, and the way we've made those strides is through investment in research funding. And the scientists are telling us that we need to see an investment of $2 billion per year over the course of the next 10 years to move the needle on Alzheimer's disease. And we're currently, as a country, only funding about a quarter of that. And so we really are hopeful that this kind of study will point out the seriousness of the disease and help to spur on the country to make that kind of investment.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Keith Fargo with the Alzheimer's Association. We appreciate you helping us flesh out these numbers, and it's important information, and hopefully it'll lead to more studies, and we'll know a lot more in the coming years.
Thank you.
So thank you for your time. And we'll be right back with a daily quiz, so stay here.